Today is also International Day for Women and Girls in Science, and I am particularly delighted to be introducing Professor Wendy Chapman. Wendy is the Director of the Centre for Clinical and Public Health Informatics and Associate Dean Digital Health at the University of Melbourne. Today, Wendy asks us, can we move from individual to collective impact in digital health? Please join me in warmly welcoming Wendy Chapman.
Well, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's a little daunting to follow Chuck, but just lower your expectations a bit and maybe I'll meet them. The center that I'm directing, I moved to Melbourne in September from the University of Utah where I was, and the center is going to be called the Center for Digital Transformation of Health. We decided not to name it with the word informatics because we wanted to call it what we're trying to accomplish, and that's been well received in our community. And I really see our center as trying to create a learning health community in Melbourne, and the center has resources to help build that infrastructure to support the parties, and so that's what we're trying to do there. And we're still in the relationship building and strategy process. I liked the theme of this conference, and our vision that we decided for our center is going to be connected health, which aligns perfectly with bridging these gaps so that the patients, throughout the patient's journey. So I'm going to start with a story to illustrate what we mean by connected health. Do a thought experiment with you about, like Chuck said, a system solution for a system problem, and then ask you a question. So first, this is Fiona. She's a 14-year-old girl who plays soccer and has asthma. Now this is all pretend, what I'm going to tell you, so if someone comes in late, they'll be like, wow, you guys are doing amazing things. No, we're not, this is all pretend, so disclaimer. And this is actually my daughter, who's now 23, and this is her when she was 14. And her name's Claire, but I just love the name Fiona, and lots of people here have that name. Okay, so you ready for the story? Fiona is in a PE class in her school, her secondary school, and the University of Melbourne has created these education programs for data science where they're able to wear Fitbits and use their watches and calculate their information and learn how to interpret and learn from the information that she's generating, that they're generating as students. Also, her primary care, her GP has a program to track patients with asthma. And it's called Asthma Tracker, eAsthma Tracker. And with that, it takes information from her phone and her Fitbit, information from the sensor that she has in her home to look at air quality, and an app that she inputs information in every night about her situation, and creates a dashboard that she and her parents can look at to find out how she's faring and try to prevent asthma attacks and trips to the emergency room. Well, her GP has a panel management system as part of this asthma tracker, and that shows how the patients are doing, and she's able to look at the population. And she sees that Fiona is not doing very well, and she's using her inhaler every morning and every night. And she's supposed to be just using it as needed, but she's starting to use it really regularly, and so she thinks it might be time to switch her treatment plan or see what's going on. So because she can see this, she calls Fiona and her parents in, and they come in and they look at the data together and they talk about what might the next move be for her asthma. And the GP also has a decision support system to help make decisions about best practices given Fiona's particular data. Well, then there was, the winds changed direction in Victoria and the smoky air came to Melbourne. And of course, there was a big spike in emergency room visits for people like Fiona who had asthma. Well, luckily, in the emergency room at Royal Children's Hospital, the ED doc was able to see everything. Could see, that including the data that's been generated from Fiona's, on Fiona's dashboard and the GP data. And so within a few minutes, that ED physician immediately knew kind of her situation, what her treatment is, what's been going on over the last few weeks with her. And that was really helpful for situational awareness and the history. Also, the ED doc has a decision support system that helps risk stratify. Should we discharge or admit this patient? And if we admit the patient, should the patient go to the general floor or the ICU? So Fiona is admitted, and she stays in the hospital overnight and then is sent home. And all the information that's generated during that visit is now propagated back into her information, her record, as well as the GP's data. So everything that happened is now updated. Well, Royal Children's Hospital is participating in this learning health community that we've built in Melbourne. And they're trying to, do some learning projects. And one of the things that they've been doing is looking at patients who have positive outcomes for asthma versus patients that have negative outcomes for asthma. What makes the difference? And they've been doing process mining to look at all the steps that happen during a patient's visit and what differentiates them. And they found that patients who are provided a discharge plan, a very detailed discharge plan, do much better than patients who are not. And actually, and people tell me not to say this in front of doctors, but actually they found that if the nurse discharges the patient, they do much better than if the physician does. And so they've reworked their workflow so that the nurses are discharging them, and that's because the nurse is spending much more time in providing this discharge plan. So Fiona got sent home with a discharge plan. In addition, the center has set up with these partners a kind of A/B testing, rapid cycle embedded testing system to help them quickly assess whether an intervention is working or not. Because like Chuck was describing, a lot of people, you make decisions, oh, we're going to do this, and you put it in place, and you don't really know if it helps. Not only do you not know if there's enough evidence to do it in the first place, you don't know how it works. And so we've worked together as part of our collaborative to create this rapid cycle testing. And one of the things that they want to look at is they're having their patients measure peak expiratory flow every morning and every night. And, it's a burden on the patients. They don't really know if it helps. Well, they learned that they have smart inhalers now. And so they created a quick randomized trial for their patients. And Fiona got randomized into the group that got sent home with the smart inhaler. And now they're going to measure and see if this, if measuring the peak expiratory flow really helps or not. And in a couple of months, they'll have that answer, and they'll decide whether or not to change practice. Well, the government, and this has been, learning this healthcare system in the last few months has been, an eye-opener. And I am far from mastering it. So much more to learn, but it's the government's role in healthcare that often just throws me and confuses me, because when I think of a hospital, I think of a business. And then I have to think, oh wait, no, that's the government. And then there's the state and federal. Anyway, it's complicated, but so if I say things that don't make sense to you, give me the benefit of the doubt. But the government has been collecting information from all the hospitals and looking at outcomes for asthma patients across the state. And they're able to see, and they're trying to create system intelligence. What's going on in the system, and how can we make it work better? And that is their goal, from what I can understand. And they have all this integrated data, and they can see that hospital number one here is Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, and it's doing so much better on asthma outcomes than some of the other hospitals. Well, now they're able to dig down and say how much of that is due to the patients. Patients in some hospitals might be more sick, right? So the risk. They're able to risk stratify. And how much of it is due to the processes that are going on in that hospital. And they can see that there are these certain predictive factors, including the discharge plan and process, that are predicting why Royal Children's Hospital is doing so much better. So from that, they're able to modify, some different policy and payment structures, because Royal Children's has changed their payment structure. Well, okay, that's not really true, but they need to see. Anyway, I'll go on later. Also, they're helping create metrics that will really help drive better care, not just increase documentation burden, as Patty described in her talk last night, and more training for the workforce. And particularly, they want to figure out ways to disseminate the innovation. Royal Children's is special. It's got a lot of money from a big foundation. It's affiliated with academic institutions, and so they're building a lot of digital innovations. Other hospitals are not able to do the same thing. So how can the government help disseminate that type of those digital tools and to these other places? And not just, oh, here you go, plug it in, but really help disseminate them so that they're useful in those locations. And so the government's able to play a much larger role in truly creating that system intelligence. All right, so that's the pitch that I'm giving to the CEOs of the hospitals and when I go meet with them about what we're envisioning. Because when I first would talk with people, they'd say, oh, you're informatics, you're about data, you want us to collect data. Well, we're not only about data. And then when I describe this, he's like, oh, you're not just about data, you're trying to really change what we do and improve health. Yes, thank you. So now how do I make this happen? So I want to engage you in this thought experiment. So all of those pieces in that scenario, in that story, exist. Asthma tracker, that's in place at Primary Children's Hospital in Utah. Those decision support tools, there's nothing in there that hasn't been built or couldn't be built. So why can't we do this? Why does this seem so far off? Okay, so I thought I listed, and you don't have to read all of these, but to make this happen, here are the things that we need. And I'll highlight a few of them. We need to, have people, the students like Fiona and their parents know how to, interpret data. They need to be able to sit with their clinician and visualize things in a way that they can make sense of rather than some data dump that happens with Fitbits. There has to be a lot more data sharing. There have to be financial things in place to really incentivize the pediatricians and the GPs who are right now not financially incentivized to look at a panel of patients and be proactive. You have to be able to build clinical decision support and integrate it with your EMR. You have to have an infrastructure to do this rapid cycle testing, and so on. So this is a lot of things to be able to put in place to really string all of those parts together. And so we can't do that in Melbourne without the work that CSIRO is doing in terminology servers and I'm just learning the things that they're doing. It's amazing. The Digital Health CRC that Tim's here, the work that's going on there is really pivotal. They're influencing government and trying to do things that will help us be able to accomplish our goals in Melbourne, even though we're not part of the Digital Health CRC. The stuff that Enrico's group at Macquarie is doing in the artificial intelligence work. We need that to do this predictive analytics. HISA, which is now the Australian Institute for Digital Health, and the communities and networks that they're pulling together and the workforce development that they're doing. And, all the individual projects. I was just amazed at how many informatics and digital health projects are going on in Melbourne, and same thing here. There's so many people working on so many amazing things, and they all are needed to pull them together. But even with all that great work, is that going to help us accomplish this vision of connected health in 5 years, 10 years? Without a focus on it, I'm not sure that the fact that all these flowers are growing and blooming, that we're going to actually be able to accomplish that. So let me bring up the idea of collective impact, and I'll try to go fast. This is the idea that too many organizations are working in isolation, and we need to figure out how to have a structured way to work together. You have to have a common agenda, shared measurements, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communications, and you need a backbone organization that will help build the infrastructure to do this. And there are a lot of collective impact activities going on in Australia. One that started it all in the US is called Strive Together, and it's about children. And they've had some really great results, but the key is they created this roadmap of what they wanted to measure collectively. And then once they do that, they can start funneling all the resources that are going into this from all different places, all the people together trying to work towards those same measurements. And so could we create a roadmap to connected health as a nation and pull out these things, digital health literacy, that no one place can do that, and we're all building tools and educational materials. We need a way to do that together. Common data models, interoperability, the partnership reporting with the government. These are all things that none of us can do on our own, but we're all doing. Okay, so then my question is, and let me give a little prelude to the question, that I'm new in this country, and it's just amazing to me that the history that the Indigenous Australians were here at least 65,000 years ago. That's so long ago, and they had such an amazing infrastructure and culture. And if you read Dark Emu, which I'm almost finished with, about the aquaculture and the agriculture and the cool things that they have in place. I've been discovering such cool animals. So I went to just in the last 24 hours, I saw this Bilby in a zoo, but still, it was like, wow, I've never seen it. And it has a pouch and it hops. And it has ears like a rabbit, and it's just overwhelming. It's so crazy. And then last night I walked to dinner and saw the flying foxes, and I was talking to everyone. Oh my gosh, did you see that? And I wish I could have taken such a great picture. I did take a video, which I won't play. Oh, I am playing it, it looks like. Okay. And then I went to, I just was looking for Mexican food because I love Mexican food. And here was this two wolves, and it's a community cantina. They're all volunteers at the restaurant. And then all the money goes to these, global causes. And I just thought that was so cool. So Australia is amazing. And so the question then is, why can't we create a learning health community nationwide to achieve something like connected health? And it doesn't have to be that vision, but some, bigger vision, using collective impact, where we create a separate group that builds that backbone. We create the measurements together. We're all working in parts of it, but now we pull it all together. And so I phrased it as not can we, but why couldn't we? Because I challenge you, tell me why not. And then we can work on trying to break down those barriers. So I'll close that with my puppy, Kari. Just to give a little shot of oxytocin to everyone. That's who I left at home with my husband, who was going to join me, but he had to take care of the puppy. So thank you.
Questions for Wendy, who I feel has laid down the gauntlet.
Yes.
So if we're all doing work, why couldn't we do it together? So one there, and then number two further up.
Thanks. Peter Drucker is quoted as saying that...
Am I on? Yeah. Peter Drucker is quoted as saying that people do what they're paid to do. In light of that, what sort of reimbursement model drives a learning healthcare system like the one you're talking about? Because the current one obviously doesn't.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to that, but I think we need to be able to test things. We need to be able to, say, what about this model? We think this might help in this way, and work with the government and if we have it set up so that we can test new models of care and know within a few months or even 6 months or a year rather than 17, then we can be more quick to answering that question. Yes.
Thank you for the great talk about reality, I suppose. What are your thoughts about how commercial powers play a role here? We're talking about government research. I think most of us here are researchers in academia, but commercial powers like Google, Facebook, they can do all this stuff if they want to. They have the resources and the infrastructure.
Yeah.
But of course, they're thinking of the commercial aspects. Well, I hope what we're thinking about as well is the public health aspect.
Yeah.
So how can we play a role, I suppose?
They have to be part of it. This learning health community needs to have industry, government, academics, community. It needs everybody. And they're all going to have competing incentives. But if you have a shared goal, and I think they do. I think a lot of the industry, they want to accomplish it, and they can't do it alone either. They need ways and places to test these things and see if they work.
So we've got one question at the front here.
Okay.
Thank you, Wendy. Your talk was truly inspirational for somebody as a clinician who works out in the community with adolescents. And I loved your story. My question is, how much involvement does that Fiona or the student have to ensure that you collect appropriate data? Does that person, if that person, especially as an adolescent, refuses to do a peak flow or doesn't take their medications, how much would that system be influenced?
Yeah, you have to have motivated patients. It also has decision support, this actual tool, Asthma Tracker, and it will prompt them for things. But I think asthma patients in general are pretty motivated. They don't want to have an asthma attack and go to the emergency room. And so, but it's definitely, getting people involved is difficult. Yes?
How much does financial modelling go into your pitch? You may be talking to CEOs saying, all this is wonderful and good, but when it says it's going to cost you X number of dollars, X number of millions of dollars to run, that's when they'll reel back. Whereas if you did financial modelling and was to say, and as a result, people would save this much money by shifting it from this bucket to that bucket or whatever, how much of that comes into as you try to build up this collective health impact?
Yeah, the financial part's really important for CEOs. Even here, when it's government run, they're basically judged on the bottom line. And so right now, what we're saying that we're going to bring value to them is that we're going to take their best and brightest that they already have. We're going to take problems that they already care about, and we're going to mentor them and bring the university expertise to them so that we're building a team to help them do their individual projects, and that we're going to help build this infrastructure that they want, but they know they don't want to build alone. And so it's that group versus alone. I think they see that as being helpful.
And one final question at the back.
Sorry, I don't ask a second question. Wendy, great talk. Thanks very much. I just slip my consumer hat on for a moment as well. I have atrial fibrillation, and I think in your list of challenges to these kind of new models of care, I don't think we can underestimate the cultural change that's required. So I see a cardiologist, she's in her mid-40s. She makes no attempt to interact with technology with me, but there's many ways she could actually do that. She only sees me once a year, and I joke, some of you have heard me say this before, I joke that I have more interaction with my hairdresser between appointments than I do with my cardiologist. At least I get a prompt. I just wonder whether you reflect on that. I think that's a really big challenge, because it actually means she's going to have to do things very differently if she's going to interact with me in a different way using technology.
I think so too, and I think it's going to be it's going to be a gradual change over time with kind of workforce training and developing things that are actually useful. And I'm sure it's going to be decades before you could actually get to a place where everyone is interacting in that way. But I'm hopeful.
Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah, thank you.